This is John for Global Traveler Magazine. Today I'm on the beat with Adam Chalifoux. We're talking podcast and we're talking running with the Bulls. How are you, Adam?
I'm great, John. Thanks so much for having me on.
Thanks for being on. So tell us all about running with the Bulls.
Running with the Bulls is a passion project that turned into a big part of my career, honestly, and a big part of my life. It started as a college podcast. Uh, so this is season 6 for us, our third podcast season. We had 3 seasons as a college show at Radio DePaul Sports. And we talk a lot of Chicago Bulls, as you may imagine, but I think we're more of an NBA show. We talk about a lot of different teams. I think the big thing that sets us apart is, frankly, we have a very funny show. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. I'm not going to be bashful about it. We've had some really funny ideas. We have some funny guests on, but we can provide you with basketball information and a laugh.
Have you been embraced at all by the NBA or the Bulls?
Not the Bulls. Some people know who we are as a podcast. We're still trying to get the word out there. We've talked to Sam Smith a handful of times and stuff, but I think we're just now starting to get a lot of that big growth. This has been a big last few months for sure, where things are starting to get a little bit of momentum, but we've only been selling advertisements on the show for about 6 months. And so it took us a while to, I guess, get that popular.
Well, I mean, it hasn't taken you that long. It's only been a few years, and it's pretty popular. I know a bunch of my friends, a bunch of my Bulls friends listen to you as well.
Oh, that's awesome.
With the current situation, though, the season in hiatus or limbo, I guess, I know you're still producing podcasts because I've listened to them. But what are you doing to fill the void right now?
Well, I think it's a really interesting time because we don't have our sports, but it's times like these when we really look to sports to provide some comfort and give us a little bit of an escape. And so it has been a bit of a challenge to try to figure out how can we cover something that's not happening right now. But after we figured out some more creative ways to do it, I think our last few episodes have actually been some of our best. And so we started to just look at things a little bit differently. Some recent segments that I really enjoyed were one, we had a third person on the show, our friend Ben, where we had a basketball draft, a pickup basketball draft, if you will, hypothetical. And so the rules were you could pick any player from after the year 1954. And then we all drafted a 5-person team, and then we decided whose team was the best and let Twitter vote on who was the best after the show. And so that was really fun because we got to analyze across these different decades and then talk about the subtle differences between organized basketball versus the kind of basketball game you might want to play at the park and how that might translate to different skill sets. Another one we did, actually part 2 of this episode, so we took the same pool of players but actually made them play, in this hypothetical, flag football. And so how would Ben Wallace do as your main blocker? How would Karl Malone do as your tight end? I had Michael Jordan as my wide receiver, Iverson as my quarterback. But, there's videos on YouTube of Michael Jordan throwing a football 65 yards in the air, and Allen Iverson, obviously a really good high school football player. And so that was fun to look at these guys' athletics, look at their skill sets, and then try to identify the traits that would make them good in another sport. And so that was another creative way that we did it. And then our most recent episode, recently there's been this trend on social media where people will go to this website and change these albums out to have a picture of Bill Clinton holding an album and then being surrounded by albums. And so I was inspired by a comment Sam Smith made on the show that every season he covered was like a story. And so we decided every season that we've witnessed, we decided to go back to the year 2000. So we were both very conscious basketball plans, or basketball fans. We are both around 27, 28 years old, Reed and I. And so then we picked our 4 seasons, our 4 albums, if you will, and created Phil Jackson swag. So I've been learning Photoshop because I got some time on my hands, and I put Phil Jackson's head on top of Bill Clinton's. And then our albums were the 2016 Cleveland Cavaliers, the 2011 Dallas Mavericks, the 2003 Detroit Pistons, and I want to say the 2014 San Antonio Spurs. And so we've been getting in a lot of history and hypotheticals, but just try and find different ways to be creative and engaging, and also different things where we can also get our fans involved. Like, who would be on your flag football team? What album would you choose?
So I got to put you on the spot now as a Bulls podcast guru. Who are your top 4 or 5 Bulls? Let's do Mount Rushmore. Who are your top 4 Bulls of all time?
Ooh, wow.
Doesn't have to be the best, but your guys.
My guys. Okay. So I'm probably going from like 1990 on. So honorable mentions, guys I know were awesome from some of the old games I've watched or talking to some of the OGs. I can't put Jerry Sloan, Bob Love, and Artis Gilmore on there, but they'd certainly be in contention otherwise. Maybe even Norm Van Leer. But for me, I'm actually wearing a Luol Deng player tee right now. I got this in 2010, and that guy is an absolute warrior, so he has to be on there for me. How dominant he was defensively. He was the best at guarding the LeBron Jameses and Kevin Durant's in the world for a while. So he's there. Derrick Rose, who's probably the captain of my Mount Rushmore, if you will. That's a guy my dad and I saw play when he was a senior in high school at Simeon. So even if he wasn't a Bull, I knew I was going to be rooting for him in the NBA. And he has really turned into probably my favorite basketball player of all time. Next, I got to go Joakim Noah. Just the energy. It's very hard to describe. And another thing I really like about Joe is the selflessness he showed when he was willing to go to the bench when Pau Gasol got there. In the versatility he showed and the adaptability he showed. When the team needed him to be a playmaker, he found a way to become a playmaker. When the team needed him to be the best defensive player in the world, he was pretty consistently among the best defenders in the world. And I just really love the intangibles with that guy. Just played with so much heart and energy. Now, those are 3 easy ones. This 4th one might be a little trickier. I know it's not going to be anyone. Well, no, it's going to be Kirk Hinrich. It's going to be Kirk Hinrich. Hey. That was a guy I rooted for him when he was with Nick Collison at Kansas, watching the tournament years there. But that's another guy who just plays super hard. I remember Rondo throwing him into the scores table in that series against Boston. Him coming back to the Chicago Bulls, how sad I was when he got traded and kind of bounced around with the Wizards and the Hawks. But Hinrich, man, that is like baby Bulls prime right there, when it was Hinrich and Gordon, very young Luol Deng, and they would just play their tails off. And he's your 3-and-D combo guard, and definitely a huge fan favorite for anyone who is a big fan of the Bulls during that era.
Hey, I can't argue with your choice. I mean, I would go back. I'm a lot older than you. I would go back to the Sloan and Van Leer, those guys, but I can't argue with your choices. So could you give us any scoop on anything upcoming on running with the Bulls?
Let's see. Well, that was a bit of a blitzkrieg, if you will. This past week, we released a bunch of episodes. But we had been working on a project that we kind of had to put on pause, where it was going to be called Team Takeover. And so we did have someone we were originally going to have on for Team Takeover. There's not a lot to talk about around the league, but we had someone on from the Utah Jazz, my friend Andrea Urban. This next week, we haven't really gotten to the drawing board too much, but I know we're going to be talking a ton, at least every single Monday from now on, about the Last Dance series. And I think that will inevitably lead into discussions later on about who truly is the greatest basketball player of all time. Another thing that's come up a lot and should continue to come up is how will some of these players from The Last Dance, whether that is a Jordan opponent or someone on those 90s Bulls teams, how would they fit in today? We talked for a long time about Scottie Pippen as a modern power forward, someone who could be like a Tobias Harris in today's game. And so I think we'd be continuing to compare and contrast the present and the future, or not the future, the present and the past of the NBA.
Now, we're a travel magazine, so I will ask you this question about travel. Where would you like to see a Bulls game? If you had to go to any of the other arenas, what would your number one choice be?
Well, actually, at the top of my bucket list is seeing a game at Boston Garden. I grew up a Bulls fan, obviously, but I really got hooked on basketball history from a really young age. I would get these DVDs for Easter or Christmas. I remember one was called NBA Guts and Glory. And seeing these old games with these titans, these mythic figures, Bill Russell and Larry Bird and this Havlicek guy who stole the ball, it really made that a larger than life venue for me. And so that's actually at the top of, forget basketball, that's the top of my bucket list to see it, hopefully the Bulls, but I'd settle for the Lakers too. But seeing a game in the Garden is definitely up there for me. Other ones, I have not been to the new Bucks Arena yet, and I'd love to see a game at Staples Center too.
Good choices. Now, before I let you go, we're talking about running with the Bulls, but you also have another podcast.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about that.
Absolutely. CU Buffs Country is a pretty new podcast. It was Colorado Overtime, and I was really fortunate enough during the time I was doing Colorado Overtime to meet two really good guys, Vinay and Chase. And Chase is writing for a Sports Illustrated website, cubuffscountry.com, and he asked me essentially if I would be the podcast team captain. And I used to have him on almost on a weekly basis just because he was so on top of the beat. And so it really came together well. We're running the triangle offense, if you will, with the three of us. And we talk about CU sports right now. We're talking a lot of NFL draft, obviously. We're talking about some of CU's NBA prospects. McKinley Wright's trying to go pro. Tyler Bay is probably going to go, I think maybe the late second, but maybe the late first, rather, maybe the early second round. But we talk about CU in any podcast I'm going to be on. I'm going to bring the personality. I think that is one of the best parts about podcasting is you can be yourself. You don't have to really reel it in too much. So we have a ton of fun on that one too.
Well, that's what separates. Anybody could do a read of if somebody's handing you the stuff to read, anybody could do that. But it's a personality that makes your podcast fun. And that's why I like listening to Running with the Bulls. It's a lot of fun. I obviously am a Bulls fan, lifetime Bulls fan, and especially now when there's a little less to do, it's good to hear talk of sports. It's good to hear talk of the Bulls. It's going to come back, but we're still going to be listening to Running with the Bulls.
We'll keep them coming. I think that a lot of people have asked us to keep the content coming, and I think that it's great that we can continue to do the show despite the difficult times, but it means a ton to me and Reed that if we can provide someone with some entertainment for an hour or two, if we can provide someone with a laugh or a smile or just a little bit of an escape at this time, that means a ton to us. And we all got into sports for the love of the game. And so I hope that, transcends through the podcast as well.
Well, it certainly does, my friend. So before I let you go, it's your shot now. Tell everybody where they could find you and or your podcast online.
Awesome. So I am at Fantastic Mr. Foo on Facebook or I'm not on Facebook, rather on Instagram and Twitter. That's Fantastic Mr. Foo. So Fantastic MRFOUX. Fantastic Mr. Foo. Last 4 letters of my last name. And if you want to find me on Facebook, I have a page where I'll share episodes. That's just Adam Chalifoux. And so first name Adam, last name Chalifoux, CHALIFOUX. So that's Adam Chalifoux on Facebook, CHALIFOUX. On Instagram and Twitter, Fantastic Mr. Foo, spelled FOUX on the last 4 letters.
And where can they find your podcast?
The podcasts are available on all major podcast applications. We did have a little bit of trouble when we transferred it over from our old company to our new one. So I've been trying to figure out a few things with Spotify, but normally we're on Spotify. We're just about everywhere else. Podcast Box, Apple Podcasts, you name it, we'll be there.
And we'll find you, my friend.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me.
Adam Chalifoux, running with the Bulls. Thank you very much. And we'll catch up with you in the future, buddy. Stay well.
You too. Thank you.
Thank you.